Okay, back to the types of contractions. So there's two types, isotonic and isometric. So iso means same tone, same length. So when the tension is uh, lifting a baby, for instance, uh, you want to maintain the force of contraction so you don't drop the baby on the floor and crack its head. You're going to do an isotonic contraction. Isometric contraction, the same length. So the length of the muscle stays constant. And if you hold a baby at arm's length, the length of the muscle will be maintained as constant. Here, you're going to continue to maintain the same tension. So muscles can only pull, they don't push. It elongates passively. If you're pulling on a muscle as suppose you're pitching or throwing a football or hitting a tennis ball, your muscles will be uh, stretched and so on. And if you need to move the limb or extend the limb, different muscles will contract and other ones will relax. ATP is absolutely essential. We noted that when we looked at the energizing of the myosin heads. Um, Muscles consume a great deal of ATP. Uh, Energy is transferred into the formation of cross bridges and pumping the calcium back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. This is creatine phosphate. That's another source that stores ATP within the muscle. Uh, the creatine phosphokinase is an enzyme that catalyzes uh, the production of ATP. So ADP, adenosine diphosphate, the most of the energy becomes when it's adenosine triphosphate. Okay, so your muscles are constantly building up creatine phosphate where we're able to regenerate ATP. There's no muscle contraction without adenosine triphosphate. So you can have line activity, aerobic metabolism of fatty acids, uh, stores glucose in the liver. If you want to have more glucose available to generate ATP by the mitochondria, and then peak activity, anaerobic, very, very quick breakdown, and that's without oxygen. Aerobic means with oxygen. So if you generate glucose and break it down to uh, form ATP, going through the biochemical processes in the mitochondria, because glucose is the ultimate source, along with amino acids and fatty acids, to take the energy stored in this sugar or this fatty acid and produce more ATP. But lactic acid builds up if it's a very, very fast peak activity. So that's why you get muscles get sore, because of the presence of lactic acid. So the mitochondria in the muscle fibers has to take glucose, produces CO2, and that produces ATP and creatine phosphate joining to creatine and a phosphorus. So that makes the situation in resting muscle. Uh, First of all, glucose is stored in the liver if you don't need much glucose at the moment. But if your muscle is moderate activity, there'll be oxygen available, and you will have ATP available and also creatine phosphate. Okay, so notice oxygen is available. Okay, oxygen is available in resting muscle. In moderate activity, glucose will produce pyruvic acid, and that pyruvic acid will enter the mitochondria, and it needs oxygen to do oxidative phosphorylation. Oxidative phosphorylation means that with oxygen, you're going to produce 34 ATPs, and that ATP is going to support muscle contraction. But again, oxygen is available. If you have peak activity, there's not going to be enough oxygen to generate more ATP in the mitochondria. So this is a very rapid breakdown of glucose into pyruvic acid, and you're only going to produce 2 ATPs, and that's going to get rid of your ATP very quickly and also use up creatine phosphate. Okay, when a muscle loses its ability to contract due to low pH, low ATP, the muscle has to recover, and you have to get active blood supply to your muscles. You have to rest. You have to wait for the oxygen necessary to generate more ATP and to make more creatine phosphate. So that oxygen debt has to be fulfilled. So the muscle has to recover. We all know if we engage in a very, very quick run for a little while, we're going to have to rest and relax and recover. We know if we are running long distances or extended activity, we're going to have to rest to get rid of the oxygen debt and to let the muscle build more creatine phosphate with oxygen, because with oxygen, it can produce 34 molecules of ATP versus only 2 when there's not oxygen present. So at rest, the muscles metabolize fatty acids and store glycogen. When they get into moderate activity, ATP can be generated with oxygen, breaking down carbohydrates, lipids, or amino acids. At peak activity, most energy is provided without oxygen. This is a very fast process, produces much fewer ATPs, but overall the muscle at the end needs that oxygen to get rid of the lactate and to generate more ATP and creatine phosphate. Chicken breast versus chicken leg. Fast fibers are large diameter, store a lot of glycogen, brief contractions. Slow fibers, they're smaller diameter. Myoglobin also helps carry more oxygen into the muscle. So fast fibers and slow fibers, white fibers versus red fibers. I'm not going to ask you about which is red or white because I can't remember at the moment. And but depending upon if you need brief, powerful contractions, that's the fast fibers. If you need slow fibers to have a slow, steady contraction, so these muscle fibers are different in diameter, different in the amount of myofibrils, which means the amount of actin and myosin packed in each myofibril. And these slow fibers need a rich capillary supply because they're going to have a slow, steady contractions that are going to use up a lot of ATP, and they're going to need more oxygen to recover. Okay. When you condition your body, you can train it to be as efficient as possible without oxygen. If you do strength training, you can bulk up like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Okay. And you can increase the blood supply to your muscles and to make the muscles more able to use oxygen and to store creatine phosphate and to produce ATP. Okay, if you don't use it, you lose it. If they're inactive for days, you can your muscles will grow smaller and weaker. I know all about that. I'm old and inactive, and I gotta get more exercise. Okay, let's take a break. Let's get rid of that. Let's shut down this recording session for this particular